Hey, long time no see, man.
Absolutely. We're good.
All right. We're going to start our general government committee meeting, discussion of signs in the public right of way. And I believe we have a presentation from our city attorney, Doug.
I'll go quick. Some of this stuff isn't necessarily right on point with what you're talking about, but we'll fly through this this PowerPoint. Before we do that, I think Melissa handed out a little handout to you guys.
Yep.
And I won't go through that either. I'm just going to point out one thing in there. This is kind of the message of most of what we'll talk about. Wow, this is sour.
Did you put a war? Did you have a warhead?
Wow.
That was
You
a
had a
bold
warrant.
choice.
Yeah, mistake. Okay, so this is from a Supreme Court case in 2015. While local governments may appropriately regulate certain physical characteristics of signs, flags, and banners, such as their size or construction, they are almost entirely prohibited from regulating the message the devices convey. Okay? It's called content-based regulations or considerations. So, as kind of an opening swing, that's one of the things we'll be thinking of. So, Chris, go ahead and go to the next slide up here on the TV.
Okay.
Again, I promised I'd skip through some of these. So let's actually go to the next one.
I thought you were going to sing that for us.
I will later.
Okay, good.
So what we really, when we're talking about signs, we think of the First Amendment is when the courts get involved. So signs, flags, banners are a form of protected speech under the First Amendment. Just like being able to speak your mind, putting a sign up that says what you want to say, it's protected. Consider locations. We have government forums. Under that, we have a public forum, a limited public forum, or a non-public forum. And then we have private property. I won't dig too much into the public forums. Meeting rooms at the library, a meeting room at City Hall, reception areas, those are in that limited public forum, kind of in the middle. Public forum is more here in the council chambers when you're having a meeting, total public forum. A non-public forum is potentially a public space owned by the public, not open to the public. A jail, things of that nature, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Private property would be everything privately owned outside of the public ownership. So when you're thinking about what is a forum, you can think about the tradition of availability of the place for speech, how often here people can come in and speak their minds. They can't really go into Melissa's office necessarily quite as much, so it's a step down.
Mm-hmm.
Chris's office maybe in between, the people more likely to go in there and speak their mind than Melissa's, but maybe less likely than in a council meeting. So there's different levels of public forums. And what's the primary purpose of the place for public speech? Is the city library intended to be a place for people to go and speak their mind publicly in the midst of the library, people getting books and looking for books, or is this more a place for public speech? So that kind of between public forum, meeting rooms at the library, limited public forum, council chamber, a little higher step up. Examples of non-public forums, the next one, city office spaces, private offices, storage spaces. One thing you can think about, and it's not your issue here, but sometimes you'll get people wanting to, what do they call it? First Amendment testers is what I want to say.
Yeah, the First Amendment people that come
people
in.
that go around with the sole purpose of trying to get you in trouble for violating the First Amendment right.
Mm-hmm.
They a lot of times go into city halls, post offices, get in police officers' faces, and try to get the police or the city officials or somebody to arrest them, make them leave, do things which would be violating the First Amendment right. So a lot of times in your city buildings, city spaces, you need to decide where do you not want people, and you almost need to put up doors, locked doors, key code access to make it really clear this is not a public space where you can come speak your mind. Okay.
Decorah had that, I believe, at one time.
Yeah, a First Amendment auditor.
Yeah,
I think
that's
they like
it.
to call
First Amendment
themselves.
auditor.
They're doing a favor to the public. The government is allowed, you can go to the next one, Chris. The government is allowed to regulate non-public forums with greater latitude. Non-public forums include publicly owned property devoted almost exclusively to purposes other than individual expression. Streets, for example. Jump to the next one. This kind of gets back to that first line I read from that Supreme Court case. There's a lot of cases out there, and honestly, this is an area of law that's still constantly being developed and narrowed down. But the court has repeatedly held that to pass muster under the First Amendment, public forums, the time, place, and manner, TPM restrictions have to be content neutral, narrowly drawn, serve an important government interest, and create alternative channels of communication. So whenever you're looking at doing anything to restrict people's speech, even when it's permissible, you have to keep in mind, how can you do it in the most limited fashion? And what's the public interest? If somebody wants to put an election sign in their front yard, and they want to have it there 365 days a year, what is the public interest in not having it there 365 days a year? Why would that not be okay? Why can a business not have a help wanted sign in their window all the time? And we'll get into some of the things that you can think about, but the idea here is trying to be as least restrictive as possible when you think about some of these things. It's all about the content when it comes to political, particularly when the Supreme Court looks at political signage. That's what they call under a strict scrutiny standard. So if you look to prohibit or restrict the length of time a sign can be out, what it can say, we've seen in the last number of years some really aggressive political signs, 100% legal, right? But you'll get calls on them because people are like, that just isn't right. Why can they have that? There's a school right down the street that says F Biden, or it says F Trump, or it's legal, and they can have it there all the time. It doesn't have to be in the 3 months before an election or anything of that nature. It's protected. So to pass, again, strict scrutiny, not just on political signs, the government body must have passed the law to further a compelling government interest, and it must be narrowly tailored. At the bottom of this slide, number 4, it talks about, because this comes up, often preserving an aesthetic appeal of a city is generally not a government interest that justifies restricting citizens' right to voice their political opinions through signage. That was in that Reed case. So it is tied to political, but I think it carries over a little bit to any signage when you're thinking about, we just don't like the look of signs everywhere. There were some ordinances there for a while that got addressed where they were just kind of trying to prohibit political signs in general. That's just totally not legal. Some try to say you can only have so many signs, not legal. So unfortunately, in some cases, if people want their yard to be full of signs, there's not much you can do about it. Hopefully they won't like it, so I have to mow around them once in a while. It'll be a problem. We're going to skip commercial speech here.
Okay.
Jump to the next one.
The city allowed?
We're going to jump to all about the content.
Sorry.
So there's a couple of cases here. Sorry.
Is there feedback from somewhere? Do you hear that? Doesn't he have Doug talk?
I'm talking about Metro Media case. There's a little bit of static.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We were just wondering what the noise
All
was.
about the content.
Yep.
And not the commercial one, right?
Yep. So this case, a minute ago I said you can't always think just about aesthetics that doesn't look good.
Mm-hmm.
However, you can think about traffic safety, community safety, in general, and aesthetics kind of combined. That's been supported. You can prohibit signs on public property. This example in the City Council of Taxpayers of Vincent. Vincent was a political candidate who attached signs supporting his election to city-owned utility poles, which were removed by employees. The U.S. Supreme Court began by reaffirming the Metro Media decision that aesthetic interests do sufficiently justify a content-neutral prohibition on billboards. Found the ordinance was narrowly tailored to serve the city's interest in eliminating visual clutter. There were sufficient alternative avenues for Vincent to convey his message. So a city can, for example, if you think about this case, say no signs in our right-of-way, not political, and there's actually an Iowa Code section that we'll get to also that says you can't have political signs in the right-of-way, period. And that probably will be challenged at some point. It hasn't yet, but that exists already. So regardless of what your ordinance says, if you say you can have political signs in the right-of-way, that's a violation of state code. This case, again, so if you want to think about the right-of-way and signs in the right-of-way, even if you get into that strict scrutiny standard, political signs or other content-based restrictions, if you, as a council, decide signs in the right-of-way can be safety issues, they can be aesthetic if we get too many of them, and you can move them into the yard. So there is that sufficient alternative. Or in some cases, one city, for example, didn't want real estate signs in the right-of-way. you can put them in the yard. And the city also said, and we're going to put on our city website a place where you can go advertise all your houses. We're going to have a thing on our website that says houses for sale. So there's another alternative for it. I don't know if that was required, but that happens to be what one particular city did in that case. The city of Ladue on the next one put a sign in the front yard of her home that said "No war in the Persian Gulf. Call Congress now." People took it, stole it, knocked it down. The council said you can't have it. She can't have it. So that's just another example where content-based prohibition is not permissible. Let's see. I'm going to jump past that one too. What if the sign's offensive? We hit on that briefly. It's got to really rise to a level of almost threatening. Okay? It has to go beyond the speech into something, more threatening, maybe to a neighbor, maybe to a public official, etc. And there's an example towards the bottom here. I'll show you, but let's.
In other words, the number 3 there is, I know it when I see it.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, if it really like shocks the senses, as they might say. Hate speech. Again, hate speech is also protected. If it rises to the level of quote-unquote fighting words, is language the courts use, then you might be okay in removing it. And the court, some of the language was that narrowed the exception that allows a city to remove or prohibit fighting words type signage if it's speech directed at another person likely to produce a violent response face to face, not necessarily a fighting response, on a Facebook post, but the violent face to face type response. Finding laws prohibiting fighting words unconstitutionally vague or overbroad would be a problem. And finding that laws that prohibit some fighting words, such as expression of hate based on race or gender, are impermissible content-based restrictions. So even, in the world we live in right now, if there was somebody had a sign that, for example, said, I have a Jewish neighbor 2 doors down, go break their windows, prohibited. If they have a sign that says, I support Palestine, Jews are whatever, and it's not threatening, protected. So that's the difference. Content neutral, what you can do if you aren't sure, call your attorney. That's what it says there. An ordinance to regulate speech is content neutral if it applies to all speech regardless of the message. Intermediate scrutiny must be met. The ordinance must be important government interest, and there must be means to, and the ordinance must do so by means substantially related to that interest. So let's jump off this for just a minute, and the idea of some signs being okay in the right of way, but not all, and some being okay for a short time but not too long. The problem with something like that is some signs in the right of way, well, they have content. I mean, I saw some around the corner, maybe a pancake breakfast, spaghetti supper, anything, that's content, right? It's talking about something. It's communicating a message. If you say, we can have that in the right of way, but I don't want a content-based sign that talks about a garage sale, or a content-based sign that talks about a political message, or a content-based sign that talks about a new business downtown. Only those ones that are going to be there short-term, temporary, for a quote-unquote community event. Well, those community events are still content-based, and if you open the door to that, the door's open for everything. Okay? Now, you can open the door for that and say that's the way we've always done it, and it'll be fine. It may very well be. But if you get somebody challenging you by putting signs out there that either aren't permitted under your code or that you don't want out there and you do something about it, then you're opening yourself up to a challenge. Yes?
So why couldn't we just match the state law and have it, since the state law already applies?
Political signs, state law applies. I'm talking about kind of all other signage.
So if we said it's fine to have them in the right of way, it's just political signs still can't be in the right of way.
That's
because
correct.
of the state law. Okay.
Yep. Unless that gets changed, right?
Yeah.
So, but then, I would say that if your concern is we're okay with pretty much anything and everything else that's been in the right of way, we just don't think there should be political signs in the right of way, State law already says there really shouldn't be, or can't be if it gets followed. And if you're comfortable opening the right of way up to really any other kind of sign at all, you might want to think about limits on size, right? Types of, you can kind of narrow it down. You don't, if somebody wants to put a piece of plywood out there and spray paint on it, you could probably prohibit that so long as you're not prohibiting what they're spray painting on it. You're saying, here's the size max and type of signs that can be put in the right of way. Because again, we're thinking safety. You don't want anything too big. You don't want anything that's going to blow, tip over, go into traffic, things of that nature. You want it to be fairly secure. You want things to be attached to your street signs, to your utility poles, to that? Or would that be prohibited? We'd want to be careful too if we're going to allow signs in the right of way to make it clear that right of way and what I'll call public property are different. Because you don't, if the sign's okay in the right of way in front of somebody's house, you may not want that same sign stuck in the dirt right in front of City Hall. So, and again, if you open the door to signs being like on your library lawn in front of City Hall, by the police station, then you're really you're kind of opening the door to all signs that would be legal, non-content based signs. You can't pick and choose who you allow to do that.
What is the definition of a political sign? Is it just they are promoting a candidate? Like what? Because I'm thinking of like 8th Street. Like if we just allow all signs except political in the right of way, what are we going to get in some of the right of ways when we get someone who's not?
Yeah, I think we could probably come up with the definition somewhere, but it is broader than just a candidate, right? Yeah. City of Decorah got into a little bit of a pickle because in their downtown and their utility poles, they allowed banners to be hung up, as I understand, for like Gay Pride Week.
They sure do.
Okay. And then, a month later, the Republicans came to the city and said, we'd like to hang ours up now. Oh, we don't allow political signs. And the Republicans' argument was, well, that's a very political issue. Gay pride, blah, blah, blah. The city said, well, we don't see it that way. But their ordinance wasn't very clear on that. And again, now you are getting into content again, right? You're allowing the gay pride message, but you aren't going to allow the political message. It's just a better argument not to have, in my opinion, especially when it comes to some of those things.
So can we just say no signs in the right of way?
You can say no signs in the right of way, yes, because I think you've got aesthetics and you've got safety. And there's alternatives. There's right outside the right of way, right behind the sidewalk. They can maybe put it up. Well, there's other alternatives, just put it that way. So, or you can go the other route and say all signs in the right of way, so long as they aren't any bigger than this and they're made a certain way. You could also, and I think you have the right to do this, the right of way, maybe not all right of way, but a lot of right of way is to be maintained and the responsibility of the adjacent property owner. So I think in your code, you could also say, if you want to allow signs in the right of way of a certain size, certain condition, certain type, non-content based, you could require that adjacent property owner give permission, right? So that would prevent me from taking, some sign that I know you aren't going to like and go stick it in the right of way in front of your house and say that's protected. Okay. So I think that is a reasonable restriction too. My preference, and it doesn't make it right, and it's a policy type preference, so it's totally not mine to make. You are least likely to get into trouble by saying no signs in the right of way. Your next best option is to say, pretty much, we aren't going to try to prohibit what goes in the right of way except for size, shape, design kind of things, for safety. So your really best two choices, in my opinion, which you probably realize, anything or nothing. I think nothing is the safest. Anything, you got to live with what you get.
But just to be clear, with anything, political signs are still not allowed in the right of way because of state code.
That's correct.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
I just need to make that very clear.
Well, and to be clear on that too, to get back to your question, the state code, and we'll look at that here in a second, I'm pretty sure it speaks specifically to campaign signs. So the door might be open to other political kind of speech signs, just not, elect John for office. Okay? So you could have politically related issues on signs in the right of way.
campaign signs that are political.
Yeah, jump down a
But
couple,
they're also there.
second to last
They
slide.
are now.
This one?
Nope, keep
No,
going.
I remember that.
Keep going.
That ran down.
Right.
One more.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here, it's the 68A campaign signs.
Like clicks,
But that's political. So.
but not
But the Iowa code is specifically for things.
Yep. Property owned by the state, the governing body, or county, city, or political subdivision, including the right of way, unless the property is made open and available to any individual or group from the public for lawfully placing type sign.
We can't, so if we allow signs in the right of way, we can't limit the time they're in the right of way. It's just either blanket, nothing in the right of way, or everything in the right of way with some sign dimensions, like a max sign, but we can't limit, we can't say for like 3 days.
You could. Again, we'd have to be careful, again, on political ones, because they're under the, what I call the strict scrutiny standard.
Sure.
It's just been more protected over the years by the Supreme Court, so it's a little more risky to start putting limits on that. And, real estate signs, house for sale, that might want to be in the right of way for, a few weeks. Some cities, and I think you'd probably be okay, in the thought, is there a benefit of the real estate sign in the right of way versus just being on the other side of the sidewalk, for example? Is it that big a deal? I don't know. But some cities have allowed, in addition to, here's our restrictions on signage. Now, if you have a property, a commercial property for lease, or a multifamily residential for lease or for sale, under our code, we're going to give you the right for another sign to make that known. Kind of called a market sign, that you're marketing that building. So then you get a right to additional signage. It, either in the right of way or not in the right of way, that's another decision to be made. So.
Okay, where's everybody at? I meant none.
I thought you were asking like there's people missing. Like, where is everybody?
I meant nothing in the right of ways at this point.
I think I hate how restricted.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, because then that eliminates your yard sale signs, it eliminates your graduation party signs,
Right now, we've only had
your direction
issues
signs.
with campaign signs in the right of way, which is
Correct.
already breaking the state law.
And I would say this, when we look at that slide right here, and I apologize, I haven't really researched this ordinance that much, but if we look at, not ordinance, the state code, number 2, property owned by the state, governing body, blah, 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 and property considered the public right of way, unless the property is made open and available to any individual or group from the public to lawfully place any type of sign. So that, to me, I apologize, the more I look at this, back to our earlier conversation, I think if you open up the right of way to others,
Then it allows.
then it's open for them.
That would mean in front of City Hall.
But you could open up the right of way.
Yeah.
It would open up the right of way in front of City Hall. Now there'd be some limits on that as you get closer to election if this is a polling place.
Sure.
So there'd be some things to think about there too.
Well, plus City Hall's on a state highway too. So
But I'm sure your state highway, but the city,
Yeah, but.
you're going to be responsible for that right of way as a city.
But you said we can, if we do open it up, you said that we could put in there, you have to get permission from the adjacent property.
I think that would be allowable.
Like here,
So like.
if I wanna put it in my front yard right away, I have to get permission
Nope.
from you two, my
Only
neighbors?
from you. You have to get yourself
I,
permission.
okay.
But if I wanted to put something in front of your house in the right of way, then I'd have to get your permission. Excuse me.
So like if somebody did want to come put something in front of City Hall,
They'd have to get
permission from City Hall.
which we wouldn't grant. Which we wouldn't grant, obviously.
Right.
I think I do think also, not that this maybe is much less restrictive than you're thinking, but if you were thinking maybe nothing in the right of way, but I feel bad about, somebody having a graduation party or a garage sale. We possibly could write something in that the property owner may put a sign, a temporary sign in the right of way on their property for no more than 48 hours or something of that nature. If, for specific purposes, like events at that property. So there might be a way to write that to allow those things if you wanted to say, I really don't want any signs except for maybe those where the people who own that property want to promote something that's happening at that property. We might be able to get by with that.
Well, one of our concerns, right, was the sandwich boards for like the Legion fish fries and steak dinners and whatnot. Not to like, there's just no way around that for downtown. They couldn't put one up anywhere downtown. But there's nothing in the right of ways. If I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah. Are you talking about one that used to sit out in the street?
Oh yeah, we've had a few that go
Yep.
up the street.
I think the problem with that, obviously you can easily prohibit it because of safety arguments, but if you allow it, you gotta then allow anybody else to put up a similar type sign in the street.
What happens if I say community service-based organizations?
No, because you're limiting the content.
I didn't say what the content was, I just said they're a community-based organization.
So any content on the sign is gonna be tied to the community base, or?
I just said if you're a community-based organization, you have that right to do that.
I mean, if you form a
Okay.
campaign committee or
And then somebody comes,
Is
so
that community-based?
I would make the
How about a
argument.
community
I actually
benefit?
would make the
based
argument that would be a
organization.
community-based organization.
Okay.
We're gonna donate $1 to the
I don't, obviously that whatever the definition of that would be, could be subject to challenge, and you could still get somebody that would come in and say, I'm gonna, celebrate Satan night down at the park, and that's people in the public, I'm
Is
supporting.
that a community benefit-based organization?
Well, maybe
In
to the,
Boston?
How about this? How does a
Community
local
statement.
community-based benefit
does
organization?
that person live here, then they're local?
Still campaign committee,
I don't know.
right there.
In Boston, they got in trouble for that.
So who did?
Boston.
I'd have to think about that, Mayor, if there's a way you
It's
could
not a local
narrow it
benefit,
enough.
community benefit-based organization.
But how do you define a benefit? How do you define what's like?
What's the Lions Club?
If
What's the
I-
Legions? They're
if
all
I-
benefit-based community
If
Those
I'm
are
organizations.
running
service
for a
organizations.
position, I'm running because I think I'm going to benefit the community by serving in that capacity.
But unless you're elected, there's nothing you can do to benefit the community.
I lean towards just political, not allowed.
The door might be open, though, as we talked about here, that if we let others in the right of way, then that Iowa code section appears not
And
to
if they
apply.
want to challenge Iowa, they can.
Well, they challenge us first based on Iowa code, right? They would say Iowa code allows this and we're violating that.
Yeah.
So that is the way that I read it. I don't know why I violating that.
I don't, Mayor, if you're thinking, like most of what those community type things would be promoting would be a specifically scheduled event.
Which is
Would
what
that
we-
make sense?
Which is what we wanted. In the
Yeah, we
first
want
place.
that to be allowed. That's the main thing we want to be able to be allowed, or events.
Is for
So in my mind, I
events.
think there's two things. Get that so that's allowed, and redefine what the right of way is for these sidewalks that are 50 feet back from the road.
Or places that have no sidewalks.
Because then it makes it impractical to put a sign 1 foot behind the sidewalk.
Not that you couldn't, but it's gonna be way removed from the road.
Right. So if you had that limit, say, I don't know, what's our typical sidewalk? Say 5 feet, then 5 foot
Yeah,
sidewalk.
5 foot off.
That's what it should be.
The
So
curb.
I
anything,
suppose you could say signs are permitted in the right of way so long as they are at least
20
10
feet
feet
away.
or 20 something. So that most right of ways would be disallowed,
Or
potentially.
isn't that what in the old days they used to call the boulevard
Right, or the
Area.
parking.
and the
Yeah.
parking? The boulevard.
No sign
area.
can be allowed.
And that
A
Within,
minimum of 20 foot behind curb. And if a sidewalk is within that 20 feet, it has to be behind the sidewalk.
Can we do that?
I think you could, whatever, if that's the right number, basically,
but okay, I see
no
what you're
signs
saying.
may be placed within 20 feet of the back of curb.
That's-
If the right of way extends beyond 20 feet, they may
That's what
be
I'm
in the
saying.
right of way so long as they're outside of that 20 feet,
Yes,
is what you're thinking.
Yeah.
with approval of the adjacent property.
Yep. Your street sign, I'm still a little concerned with what community benefit means, but maybe. we could
I
go,
will take the challenge to have somebody come and challenge that.
Yeah. maybe you got people in town who might.
I'm good with that.
This is ridiculous.
They will not challenge that.
Could-
Nobody in town will challenge it. And if they do, we're gonna make sure we advertise it quite
Yes.
predominantly that they are challenging it.
Any of these organizations, would any of them fall outside of what I'll call a 501c? So a C3, a C4, a C7, one of those, like a social organization, a chamber of commerce, a charitable organization, are they all gonna be in that qualification?
Well, the fire department wouldn't be. It's a good one.
But they're a city organization. We can do what we want with fire.
Most fire departments have a 501c3
They do.
branch.
Ours does.
Oh, it does?
Mhm.
Well, there
It
we go.
does. Ours does.
The Legion definitely is.
All I'm throwing out there is an
Churches
idea
are.
that to get away from somebody walking in saying, well, I support this group of people in town, and that's my organization. To make it a step more stringent, that people would have to have evidence of the existence of their status as a entity, 501c3, 4, 7, something, and they would have to be advertising an event sponsored by that group, held within the city limits on a specific date and time.
Like
Nailed
that. Boom. Yes.
All we're after.
So anybody that meets that qualification, I mean,
Let them challenge it.
yeah, I'm just saying that's maybe not. Yeah, they're subject to some challenges there, but I think at least with what we just talked about, we'd be treating all similarly situated the same. Yeah, and subject to some content-based arguments, I suppose. But like I said, this area of law continues to develop because of there's people out there willing to make those challenges and
Let
argue.
them bring it.
I like that.
And then let's get that right away defined.
Are
So
we
that-
talking about one intersection in town, period, when it comes to that sign?
What do you mean?
I thought weren't we talking about some sign that rolls out in the street somewhere?
There's
Oh,
more. There's
yeah.
multiple.
No, they do a couple, 3 or 4 different spots.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So we won't narrow that down.
no.
No,
Are there some streets
don't
that,
even
I
mention
mean,
them.
there's probably some streets you wouldn't want it because the intersection's not gonna be big enough or safe enough, right?
Yeah, radius isn't big enough for it.
We're good.
That has been-
I write it just like you said it. And then
You
now
need
let's
to
define,
get
that
us
part's
a
over. We
table.
already
It's
resolved
over.
that.
It's over then.
We
Okay.
resolved that part. Now we just need to define what the right of way is. So that way, real estate signs are actually going to be practical and they will be seen, but not become a safety hazard.
Um, 20 feet is the number we're talking about back of curb.
Is that what it normally
Well,
is?
reasonable? 20 feet is what's in your code right now. If there is no curb, then if there's no curb line, then the street would extend or that area is 20 foot. So that's what it does say in our city code.
20 feet.
Each tile is 4 foot
Yep.
by 2 foot, so 10 long. 10 tile would be 20 foot. Or the other way.
That seems really long.
That's quite a ways.
And that's the other side of that speaker in front of Bud up to that light.
Yeah, that seems really long.
I would say from the back of curb to a
2, 3,
sidewalk
4, 5.
usually isn't
Yeah,
anywhere
it's
near
right in that light row.
From this wall to there.
I don't think that's that far.
I'd go 15.
You want to go 15?
I would like to.
Unless there's a sidewalk there, and then it has to be behind sidewalk. If the sidewalk falls within that 15 feet, it must be placed behind the sidewalk.
Cool. Yep. Great.
That
Regular
work.
sign.
Yes.
That works if we're measuring from back of curb, right?
Mhm.
Do we have any areas in town where we don't have the back of curb?
Oh, yeah. There's plenty of them.
Lots of them.
Where will we measure in that situation?
Usually where it, in the
From
the
the
city
ditch.
code it says from the
That's what it
edge of
is.
the road and then it says 20 foot.
Edge of the paved?
Edge of
Because
paved
you don't have
portion.
any roads with no curb and gutter that aren't at least paved in some fashion.
Everybody's got some sort of
Seal
Yeah,
coat or
we have
asphalt
seal
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
everybody. I have no gravel.
We have no
road.
gravel.
No gravel. We don't know.
Well, we do.
Well, we
Out of the
do.
Braille school, it isn't quite seal code.
Did you not get my picture about that?
Did you send a picture? I just saw you sent a narrative. I didn't realize there was a picture.
There's a picture attached to it.
Sometimes the narrative's so long you don't get to the picture.
Maybe that was the problem.
I was looking for J Avenue, man.
I had to clock out. I started reading it at 7. About 4, I had to quit reading the narrative.
Okay. Any thoughts on, and I don't know what they would be, but when you're thinking about signs, whether in the right of way or not, you have, I would have to look, do you have size limits? That's very typical. Like,
In their sign ordinance, it does have size.
are you comfortable with those limits? So like,
Yeah, what are your campaign signs? 18 by what?
Oh, you can get on any size.
No, but what are they?
Right.
a
Like
lot of
ten
times,
birds.
they're less than 7 square feet usually.
There's
They're
a
like
few
That's
out
what
in
I've
the
seen.
hallway over
They're
there.
like this
Yeah, be
and
2
like
foot
this.
by
You
18.
gonna grab one?
What was
Whatever
it?
this is.
2 foot by
Yeah,
18
2
inches.
foot by 18.
Don't grab
Yes.
particular. You know.
Oh my
Well,
God.
temporary
You
signs,
grab
yes,
one,
they
but
shall
I
not
think that's
exceed
right.
100 square foot.
Which is huge.
Oh my gosh, I'm putting a sign up before we change this. 100 square feet
Temporary,
on it.
temporary signs shall not exceed 24 square feet in area or 6 feet in height.
Oh, that's a big sign.
That's 8 by 3. No, we're doing that. We're, whatever these little signs measure.
There
Yeah.
you go. What is that?
18 by 24.
18 by
Okay,
24.
so-
There's the biggest sign you can put in the right of way.
Well, that would affect the
Yeah.
VFW because there's our.
Why do we see?
They might have to change.
I didn't do that. It was here. It was
Theirs
here
is
for a
a
while.
sandwich sign.
Yeah.
They,
So
they
we're
put
saying
that
all
on top
signs
of
have to be
manhole
that?
cover.
We'd want a max square feet or square.
Yeah, how big is that
Versus
thing?
Not 18.
How big is
what
the
would I say,
sandwich sign?
24.
2
No.
foot by 2
I-
foot.
Yeah, it's probably 3 by 2.
So that's 6 square feet. So
On each
no-
side.
What's that?
That'd be on each side of it.
Mm-hmm.
So 6
Yeah.
and 6.
So
And there's,
just consider that 2 signs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're good.
what instead of maximum, and you'll change this. Why don't I build in there, let's say,
10 square feet.
I was gonna say 7 to 10. I've seen 7 in places, but 10 square feet.
And if somebody wants to go out and measure
Yeah.
the American Legion sign and say, hey, it's too big,
Yep.
let them come in and say something.
Put it over there. They will.
It will not happen.
You have greater faith in humanity than I do.
I just know how I'm going to react if it does.
Exactly.
It'll be written in a way that'll, if the street's over there and this sign's in the ground, again, it'll be measured to here, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to go measure.
They were. Someone put that here from Newhall, right?
Yeah, they put a bunch of them in. I was going to go pull them out, but I didn't think it was my responsibility.
Yeah, that's Newhall. Their craft show.
It is a
And
pretty good craft show. I highly recommend it.
the Jason owner approval,
Is there something on, once the sign is pulled, how long we hold on to it?
Yeah. Us,
Right.
Andrew kind of brought this up. They
Storage
kind of felt the
area.
same way that we threw them away right away.
I mean,
The ones that got pulled sat here for a week. 7 days.
Yeah, we had them here. They were sitting.
Oh, I can't wait to-
And the people that, they were all notified.
Oh, they were all notified.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know they were notified.
Yeah.
So let us on that, Andrew.
so, what,
I was first notified to move mine, and then I was notified to come and get it, or it will be destroyed.
So you ignored the first command.
It wasn't, it was,
So you
no,
so you bucked the law and then double bucked it when you didn't come pick it up.
it would
I
appear
said,
that
oh
way.
yes.
It would appear that way.
I don't think there's any up here.
so is
It was,
it 7 days then?
no signs on power poles,
Yeah,
That's a
Yeah.
safety.
yeah, that
That's
do that. That's safety
street
thing.
signs, any of that. Yep.
Yeah.
That's a safety thing, and I know VMEU would appreciate people not posting signs up there, on their poles. People do it for
No signs
yard
on
sales.
city-owned property.
Yeah,
I
Because
like
that's
that.
separate than right away.
We don't do that.
So is it 7 days? that we-
That's what we did. It was 7 days.
Yeah, do we need to have an
You
ordinance?
can't put
We
parking
can.
lot signs in the parks.
We maybe
No.
so that
I might even make a note.
Will,
No,
will. If the
no,
sign
um,
is picked up, we'll
yeah,
hold for
no,
7
no
days.
signage
I think that makes sense.
other than city
Because we don't
department.
want to hold them indefinitely.
No.
Because they'll do like a bake sale. and they
Yeah.
wanna
Other people's
Put that in your
property.
parks.
We
Yeah.
have an issue.
Can you add something about signs that are picked up will be held for 7 days? That help? Do you think 7 days is enough?
Yeah, sure.
I
Any-
After they've been notified.
If they've been
If
notified.
they've been notified, a week seems reasonable.
And I think in some cases
does.
you might not be able to notify, right?
It's
Do as I
surprising
say, not as
somebody
I
wouldn't
do.
come down.
Construction materials of signs.
There's something.
You want any restrictions, prohibitions on how the sign is made? It's going to be a homemade piece of plywood that they stick in the ground and write on.
I don't know part of this.
I mean, I don't know that
It's
anybody's.
either gonna be on their property or 15 feet back.
I don't know if anybody's going to do that. Clearly. Yep.
I'm not worried about that.
Oh, I'm making one that's 100 feet.
Well, with the size, then it
That's
gets
the
a
current
lot
ordinance.
less.
I'm working on it too.
It's not a 4x8 piece of plywood. It's
Right.
not that.
So if you're 10 square feet, the most you're gonna be is 5 by 2.
Yep.
And it's 15 feet back.
Yeah. You can just, I guess, put it this way too. Think of the person that you would never want to live next to that's going to put 3 or 4 or 5 homemade plywood signs in their front yard, out of the right of way in the front yard, that just say stupid stuff on them and they look crappy. The neighbor's going to be calling saying, why do you allow that? Right? They exist.
Never had that call.
So you can
How
avoid
far
some.
back's the sidewalk over on 13? That's the only one I'm concerned about.
Not very far.
Is it still up or did it go down?
Hmm?
I haven't been past there. Is it still up?
Oh, they've been up all year.
Okay.
Keeps them in the winter.
So I don't know.
That's the only one I wonder about. I think it's within 15 feet.
Oh,
It's got-
yes. I'm thinking of a different one.
Seems like it.
Which ones are you guys talking about?
Taxation
Oh,
of slavery.
No, he doesn't have that one there.
Doug is the
no more.
devil.
That was like on a, wasn't that Blake? Wasn't that on a sheet?
No, that's different.
That was
That's-
That's
Different.
the
no, that
difference.
taxation
That's
of slavery is down now.
Okay.
And in your neighborhood.
I noticed that.
It's
At
not
his
a,
mom's
it,
house.
Oh, you know, I did see that when I was walking my dog the other day.
Well, I don't know.
You know what we're after now, right? To make it work.
That won't be a huge problem you'll run into. Obviously, it could be somebody could do it, but you can't prevent everything either.
Let the chips fall where they may.
We took down a big 4x8 piece of plywood in a front yard of a residential neighborhood that just had the letters painted on it, "FU," and the property had been
What were they following up on?
no Farmers Union, believe it or not, Farmers Union.
Oh.
Right? But it'd been a nuisance enforcement house. The guy was mad, so he took his last sheet of plywood we apparently didn't take and put FU on it and put it in the front yard. Protected speech. But we didn't allow that big a sign or a sign made out of plywood. It has to be made out of materials kind of similar to the neighborhood of house.
Well, maybe that's what we should put. No plywood signs.
Yeah.
Hey, those guys got plywood? There's a matter.
Limits the.
Oh, there were
And
plenty
they
of plywood signs. Over at the old steam plant.
And I'm not sure if they is
Everyone's on private property.
is a plywood sign in theory a little more dangerous if it gets caught in the wind and blows?
Yeah, technically it is. It's a
Right.
safety issue.
I mean, compared to a sign like that, or a bag sign, they call them.
Could you imagine your house getting hit by a plywood sign that just says FU on it in a storm?
Damn farmers.
I was working up in Minnesota, tuck pointing, and a tornado went through the neighboring town. We went over and checked it out, and their water tower got hit by a huge tree and put a big dent in it. And the water tower says, "In God we trust."
I,
And that the dent was right in the middle, "In God we trust."
yeah, maybe no
But did it
plywood,
break?
maybe no steel.
That water tower
No.
survived,
Did it fall over?
In
No.
general or in the
but it
road?
had a big
In
dent.
general. And right away. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Nonprofits, 501c3s,
or
okay.
fours or sevens. Yeah.
yeah, whatever.
Yep.
15 feet minimum distance.
Advertising events in the city limits. Or what if there's an event out at the airport that's outside the city limits?
it is outside the city limits.
I mean,
You know, it's city owned. It's still outside the
and
city
that's just
limits.
one example. I mean, if somebody wants to advertise if the
So
they have
Rotary
no
Club
more
is going to have
hours,
something
or
happen at a
fly
pumpkin
in.
patch. Yeah.
I don't think it has to be
Okay.
within. Because we get Mount Auburn that comes up here and advertises too.
Okay. So the organization doesn't even necessarily have to be based here. It just has to be a 501c3 475, one of those. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I know you've got certain streets that are used for this purpose. and I don't know that we have to identify them. Do you want to, if it's going to be out in the street like that, do you want to have the ability to you have to be asked, or could they start using streets you don't want it on that haven't been used in the past, or not worry about that?
I'm not too worried about it.
Are there? You said are there like 4 areas, and these are out in the street, right?
Yeah.
Like out in the center.
It's usually just downtown here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, in theory, you could put in here at these intersections, this can happen. If you want to do any other intersection, you got to get permission. But I'll leave that to you to think about.
We'll just see how it goes.
Okay.
If we need to amend it later, we
Start, and then we'll.
I don't think it's going to become an issue.
No.
Because I guarantee they'll be self-policed if they're in neighborhoods they're not supposed to be in, they'll be run flat. That's just how it goes.
Okay.
It does take care of its own on occasion.
Yeah, it does.
I think I got my notes,
All right, have that ready for the council meeting?
which
Next week?
is a week
Next
from
Thursday.
tonight.
Yeah.
I probably should. I'll do it tonight. Otherwise, I'll forget what we talked about.
You can always go back and watch it on YouTube.
Good.
Awesome.
Good job.
We're done. I'm going sleeping. I'm gonna go to bed.
I'm surprised you know about Owine tomorrow, but you were invited, huh?
I was invited. I feel bad because I was invited.
It was the Nimrods and the Northeast Iowa guys, so it's 2 groups.
Yeah. I don't know. I may still show up. We'll see. Probably not.
Yes, meeting is done.